An instructor is despised and humiliated by both parents and students at an elite school. They call his workshop a failure's thing. One day, the school is invaded by an armed man. The security guard runs away. The school administration hides. And only the one who had been ignored and humiliated decides to act. When they find out who saved the school, this is what happened. The gymnasium of the private Maplewood High School exuded pretension right from the entrance. In the parking lot, black SUVs and imported sedans gleamed under the morning sun, like a parallel display of status and power. It was Saturday, but the atmosphere felt like a corporate Monday. Fathers in suits, mothers in high heels, packed agendas, and looks that carried more weight than words. Colorful banners marked the booths for the career fair. An arch with white and gold balloons announced the theme of the year: bright futures, smart choices. Down the main hallway, the most coveted spots stood out: humanitarian medicine with international partnerships, software engineering with augmented reality, global law with alumni at Harvard. Each booth featured well-designed banners, LED screens, and gourmet coffee served in eco-friendly paper cups. Teachers moved about like gala hosts, offering smiles and handshakes to those who mattered. Back near the deactivated water fountain, a poorly printed sign fluttered in the breeze from the portable fan: survival skills and sports shooting with Mr. Jonas. The font was Arial. No emphasis. No design. The booth was a simple heap of gear: an olive green tarp over a wooden table, a compass, a crumpled canteen, coiled ropes, well-worn paper maps, and 2 used targets with perfectly grouped bullet holes. On the folding chair, an old vest and a faded helmet. Jonas stood beside the table, posture straight. Civilian clothes, beige long-sleeve shirt, well-pressed cargo pants. His crossed arms revealed forearms marked by the sun and old scars. Parents hurried past, trained eyes ignoring him. However, some couldn't resist the impulse to express their contempt. "Look at that," murmured a woman, adjusting the gold bracelet on her wrist. "It looks like a military tent in a war zone." "That's the stuff of people without an education," added the husband, laughing with disdain, his suit jacket slung over his shoulder. The comment was loud enough to reach Jonas. He didn't react. He simply lowered his eyes for a brief moment and pushed the equipment box closer to himself. The sound of the lid closing was sharper than it should have been. A curious boy, around 14, approached. His hair was messy, and he wore a band tee. He picked up one of the maps, intrigued. "This is survival, right? Like in the forest?" Jonas didn't respond. He just nodded with a slight tilt of his head. But the interaction didn't last long. A tall man, wearing a light blue shirt and a Rolex gleaming on his wrist, suddenly appeared. He grabbed the boy by the shoulder and pulled him away firmly. "Drop that, Felipe. You don't want to end up working mall security, do you?" The boy tried to justify himself, lacking conviction. "I was just looking. Looking is already contamination. Let's go check out the exchange program booth." Jonas watched them walk away. The boy turned his face for a moment, as if he wanted to apologize. But he said nothing. Some mothers passed by next, laughing amongst themselves. "Look at that. Cold War vibes. I bet he sleeps with a pocket knife under his pillow." More laughter. More silence. The teens who had attended the workshop were divided between silent respect and social awkwardness. One of them, as he left, discreetly tucked the folded pamphlet into his pocket, like someone hiding a dirty secret. Another just walked past without even looking back. Jonas began to break down the table. Each movement was precise, meticulous, almost ritualistic. He did it without a sound, like cleaning a weapon. The rope coiled just right, the targets stacked like marked cards, the maps folded with military precision. No one said goodbye. No, thanks for coming. No acknowledgments. From the entrance of the gym, a coordinator in a poorly fitted blazer watched impatiently. He was there only out of obligation. The school had almost not approved the workshop. They even feared it would stain the modern image of the event. Jonas noticed the gaze. He didn't return it. He simply finished closing the last box and wrapped the tie-down strap around it. When he pulled to tighten it, he used a little more force than necessary. Finally, he looked at the gym one last time. Not at the people, at the space. The cold ceiling lights reflected off the polished floor, but to him, everything seemed dull. He walked slowly to the side exit, his step light, even with the weight on his back. There was no hurry, no visible anger. But inside, Something was grinding. In his sweaty palm, he gripped something folded tightly. The letter. Always with him. Always in the right pocket. Without saying a word, he disappeared through the service door. Silent. Invisible. But still whole. The sound of the alarm clock was unnecessary. Jonas was already up. It was 5:12 a.m. when he turned on the kitchen light, a cold bulb hanging from a crooked wire in the old plaster ceiling. The floor creaked beneath his steps. He always wore the same slippers, worn out on the sides. Washed, yes, but irreversibly marked by time. The coffee maker was manual. A clean cloth, water boiled in the aluminum kettle, a filter over the white ceramic mug with a chipped rim. No rush. No sound except the bubbling water and the rhythmic drip of the coffee falling. On the wall, a military-style clock with hands. It marked 5:20 when he took the mug to the porch and sat in the wooden chair. A simple chair, with woven straw, reinforced by thin wires wrapped around the backrest. From there, Jonas watched the sky lighten behind the trees of the quiet neighborhood, where the roosters were still crowing, running late. There was no cell phone beside him, no newspaper, just the silence and the coffee. Then, as always, came the ritual of the sports weapons. The wooden case was in the bedroom cabinet, above the heavy doors of the wardrobe. When he opened it, the smell of fine oil mixed with the scent of old wood. Everything was organized with precision. The dismantled air rifle, the compressed air pistol, maintenance tools, cotton cloths folded into perfect squares. Jonas sat at the table with the posture of someone who respects the craft. He wiped the pieces in circular motions, lubricated with care, checked each screw as if he were tending to a body. He never did this while listening to music. Only the metallic sound of the pieces locking into place. When he finished, he aligned everything in the case with the same reverence with which he started. He closed it, locked it with a key, and only then did he put on his club uniform. A dark blue polo shirt, gray pants, a belt with a discreet buckle, clean boots, a canvas hat on the hook, but rarely worn. The bathroom mirror reflected a stern face, with deep wrinkles around the eyes and a scar above his right eyebrow. He didn't hide it, nor did he explain it. At the shooting club, Jonas arrived before everyone else. He unlocked the gates, turned on the lights in the outdoor corridor, swept up fallen leaves even when it wasn't his job. He started the compressors, set up the targets, tested the mechanisms. By the time the students arrived, young, insecure, noisy, he was already there, standing ready. His instructions were few, precise. Sometimes, a single gesture corrected someone's grip, their wrong breath, or the fear disguised as courage. During breaks, the old cell phone rang now and then. A known number. An ex-student. Sometimes two. Sir? It's Lucas. I passed the exam. Good. Do you have any tips for the training course? Breathe before shooting. And trust the first 2 seconds. The rest is consequence. That was all he said. But after, he would mentally note the name. And he would remember. Around 3 p.m., Jonas took the same bus to Mrs. Beatrice's house. He brought soup he had made, pumpkin with shredded meat, sometimes chicken with rice. The glass jar still warm, wrapped in a clean dish towel. Beatrice had been his geography teacher in high school. Now, she could barely walk. Her legs were swollen, her spine curved like a dry branch. But her eyes were still alive. You have too beautiful a heart for this blind world, Jonas, she would say, her voice weak, but a stubborn smile on her lips. He didn't answer. He simply adjusted her pillow, opened the window to let in the air, and placed the jar of soup on the small table. Before leaving, it was always the same, a discreet kiss on the forehead. A gesture no one would ever imagine from the man with the harsh voice and fixed stare. At night, at home, after a warm bath and a simple meal, rice, beans, an omelet, Jonas would sit on the bed and take the letter out of his pocket. Folded in 4, the paper worn. The creases sharp from the pressure. If anything happens to me, keep looking after the boys. The handwriting was Andre's, his best friend, killed in Haiti, in an ambush Jonas didn't like to remember. But he did remember, that specific night, the smell of smoke was stronger than that of gunpowder. There were screams in French and Creole, gunshots coming from narrow alleyways, children crying behind cracked walls. And there he was, rifle in hand, eyes fixed on his fallen comrade. Jonas did what needed to be done, without thinking, without hesitation. He carried his friend's body on his back for 2 blocks under crossfire. saved 2 civilian lives along the way. He didn't cry that day. He didn't cry at the funeral. But since then, he's carried that letter in the left pocket of his pants, always folded, always close to his skin. It's for that letter that he gets up. It's for that letter that he teaches. And it's that letter he discreetly presses between his fingers when the world seems to mock what he represents. That night, as with every other, Jonas turned off the bedroom light exactly at 10 p.m. He lay on his side, the letter on the nightstand. And he slept, not in peace, but in purpose. The noise came suddenly, like a muffled blast, cutting through the monotonous rhythm of a Monday morning. First, a scream. Then, footsteps running in the halls of Maplewood High School, the most elitist school in town, the one where children of the names engraved on bronze plaques were supposed to learn how to lead. At 9:04 a.m., the sound of a chair dragging on the corridor floor echoed through the ground level, followed by the shattering of glass. A single gunshot. Just one. And the silence heavier than one could imagine. The educational coordinator locked herself in the meeting room, fingers trembling as she turned the key. The secretary tripped on the stairs trying to escape. The security guard, the only armed one, or supposedly armed, ran out of the building as soon as the first shot rang out. He threw his badge on the floor and jumped over the turnstile like a late student, never to return. In Corridor 3, Room 8, an entire class of teenagers was pushed against the wall. A man with flames in his eyes and sweat-covered face held a small, but real, handgun. He shouted disconnected things. No one cares. They promised. Where's what they owe me? Among the hostages was Marina, the educational coordinator's daughter, and Theo, the mayor's son. The same Theo who, 2 days earlier, had walked past Jonas's booth without even looking to the side. Theo tried to act. He lunged at the invader, perhaps thinking that the action films he watched were enough preparation. But he was easily immobilized. The man knocked him down with a blow to the shoulder. Theo cried, scared, embarrassed, in pain. Outside, the main gate was cordoned off with security tape. Parents tried to get through, pushing and shouting the names of their children. One of them grabbed a police officer's shirt. I'm Gustavo's father. I demand to go in. Sir, step back. This is a dangerous situation. Inside the building, the principal tried to contact the police on her cell phone, but the connection kept dropping. The school radio had been out of order for months. At 9:27 a.m., Jonas Ribeiro was 2 blocks away. He was walking back on foot. He carried a bag left behind at his booth, ropes, a first aid kit, a notebook. He wore a long-sleeved shirt, dark pants, clean boots. As he saw the commotion, he quickened his pace. He reached the side gate where 2 officers were setting up an improvised perimeter. He tried to approach. One of the officers pushed him back with a hand on his chest. Restricted area, citizen. Step back. Jonas didn't reply. He looked inside the school. He knew every entrance, every shadow, every blind spot. A third officer, younger, recognized him. Mr. Jonas? The tone was one of surprise and restrained relief. You taught me at the club. Pistol assembly. Water emergencies. Jonas nodded, his gaze fixed. No time to waste. I need a vest, a radio, and a floor plan of the building. Now. The young officer hesitated, looking at his superior. He saved my sister last summer, he told his colleague. She fell in the river. He pulled her out. He was the only one there. Without further resistance, the equipment was handed over. Jonas put on the vest with precision. He placed the radio on his shoulder, pressed the button to test the sound. He looked at the building. Side door of the music wing. Do those old windows still open outward? The officer nodded. Yes, sir. Jonas took a deep breath. His eyes closed for a second, his hand in his pocket. He felt the familiar fold of Andre's letter. He touched it as if renewing a silent vow. Keep the parents back, and don't advance without my signal. Then, he disappeared around the side of the school. The hallway of the music wing was dark, silent. The sound of his own footsteps was muffled by the old carpets. In the distance, a low buzzing hum, the tension thick in the air. Jonas walked slowly, his back against the wall. He knew the armed man was in room 8. His eyes were sharp, scanning for any shadow and movement. But there was something in his posture. It wasn't fear. It was focus. Every breath was measured, every gesture intentional. He stopped by the door to the room, pressed his ear to the frame. Silence. Then, a voice. Irritated, but tired. I don't want to hurt anyone, but you all need to hear what you did to me. Jonas tapped his knuckles on the doorframe, slowly. 3 taps. Can I come in? Nothing. I'm not armed. Silence. I just want to talk. Man to man. More silence. Then, the sound of furniture being dragged. The door cracked open. Jonas entered. There were 20 teenagers pressed against the wall. A girl was crying softly. Theo was looking at the floor. The armed man, sweating, with deep dark circles under his eyes and a poorly groomed beard, was trembling. His hand gripped the pistol too tightly. Jonas slowly raised his hands. You're exhausted, brother. I can see it. I know that kind of exhaustion. The man didn't respond, but his gaze wavered. I've been in a place where no one listens to you, where you scream inside and it feels like the world's wearing headphones. Silence. You worked here, right? Jonas continued, his voice low. And one day, they just made you disappear like you were an old piece of furniture. The man swallowed hard. His eyes started to well up. They laughed in my face, he whispered. I know. I asked for help. I just asked them not to throw me away. And they threw you away. The pistol shook more. His fingers faltered. Jonas took a small step forward. Carefully. But you don't need to hurt anyone to prove you're human. I see you now. I hear you. The man looked at him. A look of a wounded boy inside an adult's body. Why are you here? Jonas answered without hesitation. Because one day, someone asked me to take care of those no one sees. The man began to cry. Really cry. Like someone breaking down after years of holding it in. And then, he dropped the gun. Just like that. Jonas walked over to him, took the pistol calmly, and set it on the floor. He placed a hand on the man's shoulder, who was now sobbing like a lost child. No gunshot. No siren. Just the sound of breaths returning to the room. And eyes that had once judged, now trying to understand. At the door, the first officers arrived cautiously. Jonas simply looked at them and nodded. It's done. And he left the room in silence, like someone fulfilling a promise. The spotlight arrived before the applause. Cameras, microphones, reporters running with cell phones in hand. The gate of Maplewood High School was engulfed in a haze of flashes and vague statements, as the perimeter was stretched by the presence of authorities. The mayor was already in front of the press before the last student had been released. His suit was neat, smile rehearsed, voice firm. His son, Theo, was receiving light medical attention nearby, surrounded by paramedics. But this barely mattered in the spectacle. The situation was controlled thanks to the impeccable actions of our security forces. A prime example of efficient and coordinated response, he declared solemnly, while an aide jotted down keywords for the next social media post. We are working to ensure that incidents like this never happen again in our city. Beside him, the school principal adjusted her pearl necklace and maintained a solemn expression. When called to speak, her voice trembled but was rehearsed. We are grateful for the swift institutional response. Our students are safe thanks to the successful implementation of the security protocol. No mention of Jonas. No glance toward him. As if the episode had been overcome by organizational charts and reports. Meanwhile, in the back of the courtyard, among the long shadows of the evening beginning to fall, Jonas sat alone. He had removed the tactical vest and folded it beside him. The radio was off. In his hand, a rag with which he cleaned, almost reflexively, one of the tools he had used to open the school's side window. His eyes were fixed on the ground. No anger, no indignation, just the weariness of someone who had already expected this. No one called him. No one approached him. Until small, hurried footsteps cut across the yard. It was Marina, the coordinator's daughter. She still wore the crumpled uniform, her eyes red, her face pale. She carried a light backpack. She was alone. She stopped in front of Jonas, looked at him in silence. And then, as if this were the only thing that made sense on that day, she kneeled and hugged him. She said nothing. Jonas remained still for a second. Then, he simply placed his hand on her back. A restrained, firm touch, as though holding something delicate, an antique porcelain piece. She cried, silently, crying all that she couldn't during the panic. Then, she slowly stood up and returned to the crowd. Without looking back, Jonas stayed seated, the rag now resting on his knee. His eyes returned to the ground. And for a moment, no one else existed. Across the courtyard, the arrogant father, the same one who, on Saturday, had pulled his son's arm saying, "This is for losers," approached. He staggered between shame and wounded pride, stopped a few steps from Jonas. He stood there, as if the words had been rehearsed, but now they escaped him. He began. His voice faltered. He cleared his throat, adjusted his watch. His eyes searched for something to hold on to, but found nothing. Jonas lifted his gaze. There was no judgment, no smile, just a slight nod of the head, a brief gesture. That was all. The man nodded silently and walked away. In that minimal gesture, something broke. The symbolic hierarchy that the system tries so hard to protect gave way to reality. The one who had saved their children was precisely the one who didn't fit the mold. And they knew. The teenagers knew. The teachers knew. And now, even the parents knew. The next day, a notice was sent to families. Maplewood High School invites you to a brief tribute to instructor Jonas Ribeiro in recognition of his contribution during the incident. It was a formality. Cold. But Jonas attended. He stood beside the hastily assembled stage in the gym, while the principal read a generic speech filled with terms like resilience, collaboration, and exemplary dedication. At the end, they handed him an acrylic plaque. Jonas held it with both hands. He didn't make a speech. He didn't thank anyone. He simply smiled, with his eyes. And as he left the gym, he noticed something that had never happened before. The parents, once arrogant, lowered their eyes when crossing his path. Some murmured a thank you. Others nodded with contained respect. One of them, the same who had mocked the survival workshop, extended his hand and held on for too long. Jonas shook it back, without a word. It was in the silence that he shone. It was in the silence that, at last, they recognized him. The morning after the tribute, Jonas's inbox was flooded. Invitations for interviews on local radio stations, requests for lectures at private schools in the area, even a municipal commendation signed with pomp and a golden crest. He read everything in silence, seated at the same table as always, with the same black coffee, in the same chipped ceramic mug. He left the papers stacked in the corner, next to the empty plate. He picked up the pen and responded to only one request, a simple, direct email to the Department of Education. I accept the funds to re-equip the shooting club. We need vests, headphones, first aid supplies, and maintenance for the space. No ceremony necessary. He signed as always. Jonas Ribeiro. The changes in the club started subtly. A fresh coat of paint on the side walls. Reinforced barriers. A locked cabinet for emergency equipment. New targets arrived, protective glasses, support tables. All modest, functional. No digital panels or motivational slogans. But what changed the most was who started showing up. In the third week after the incident, 2 students from Maplewood High School crossed the gate with restrained expressions. One of them was Gustavo, the same who, days earlier, had been dragged away from Jonas's workshop by his father. Now, he wore simple jeans, a white t-shirt, and a shy look. He carried a crumpled registration form in his hands. I wanted to learn, sir. If there's still a spot. Jonas simply extended the clipboard. Full name, blood type, emergency contact. The boy filled it out. The other one did, too. At the end of the session, they stayed longer than the others. They helped pack the targets, sweep the floor of the warehouse. The next day, others came. 3, then 5. All from the school that had once mocked. But there, in the club, there were no surnames. No privilege. Only silence, controlled breathing, and the demand for discipline. Not through rigidity, but through respect. Jonas treated everyone with the same direct gaze. The same firm voice. The same waiting time until they corrected their posture on their own. It was a cloudy afternoon when the scene unfolded. 2 students were at the end of the session, sitting at the long wooden counter. Davi, 13, from the peripheral neighborhood of São Luís, and Rafael, 14, from the city's luxurious center. Both were cleaning the pieces of the carbines with cotton cloths. The radio played soft instrumental music. The wind was blowing. The side door was ajar, letting in the smell of the street. Jonas observed them from afar. Davi made a mistake in the order of the parts. Jonas didn't correct him. He waited. Raphael helped. He showed the gesture calmly. Without words, Jonas approached, sat in front of them. He placed his hands on the table and took out the letter, the same one, folded with precision, the marks of time visible at the edges. He extended it to Davi. Read it to me. The boy hesitated, but read, in a low voice. Only one sentence. If something happens to me, keep taking care of the boys. Jonas nodded, his eyes fixed on the dirty cloth. This, he said, touching the paper lightly, reminded me of who I was. Pause. Today, you reminded me why I continue. Davi stayed silent. Raphael too. Neither of them knew exactly what to say, but all three understood what had been said and what hadn't. Jonas took the letter back, folded it with the same care as always, put it back in his pocket. Then he stood up. Let's wrap it up. Tomorrow, there's more. The boys followed him. Davi carried the gun case. Raphael carried the rolled-up targets. Outside, the wind picked up. Jonas turned off the lights, locked the door with the usual key, and glanced briefly at the darkening sky. He wasn't a hero. He didn't need to be. He was simply keeping his promise, with steady hands, a quiet heart, and eyes that were now seen by everyone. But only a few knew, truly, what was inside.